We're about to get an update on one of the strangest murder mysteries we've ever talked about on the show. It may be the most suppressed murder case in history, with implications involving the CIA and the JFK assassination, biological weapons, cancer, and AIDS. Unbelievable. The author and investigator of this book is Edward T. Haslam, and his book is called Dr. Mary's Monkey: How the Unsolved Murder of a Doctor, a Secret Laboratory in New Orleans, and Cancer-Causing Monkey Viruses are linked to Lee Harvey Oswald, the JFK assassination, and emerging global epidemics. Huge, huge title, but you know what? There's no other way of kind of capsulizing it. It has so many implications. Ed, it's great to have you back on the show.
Thank you very much, Allan.
Yeah, let's lay that groundwork and give us the, in a nutshell, 2 or 3 minute summary, then we'll get into those details.
Well, it's been 20 years now since I came out with my first version of the book, which was looking into the murder of Dr. Mary Sherman, and there had to be a reason that it was covered up as obviously as it was. And so I kept digging, and then people started bringing me information, and this story has grown and grown and grown. And in 2007, by 2007, we had found the device that had burned off Mary Sherman's arm. And, this was a really bizarre murder. She was found in her apartment naked and stabbed 7 or 8 times, but they didn't tell the public that her entire right arm or rib cage was disintegrated by heat. And there's practically no fire damage in her apartment. So, there's nothing in her apartment that could have done the damage. And so in 2007, we came out with Dr. Mary's Monkey. And then I started doing radio interviews, and then people started sending me more and more information about this. And so the story has grown kind of organically since then. In 2014, we added 25 pages to the book. We finally got our hands on the crime scene photos, which are up on my website. If anybody wants to see them right now, it's drmarysmonkey.com, but spell out doctor. And right there on the landing page, it says, see why we call this the hottest cold case in America. I mean, and I really think it is. This is the most conspicuously suppressed case because it involves Oswald, it involves the FBI, it involves the CIA, and it was covered up conspicuously, by the New Orleans Police Department, probably on orders from somebody else. So, that's what we had to get into, and one of my initial questions was, what are they hiding? They're obviously hiding something. What was it? And that's where we find out about the contamination of the polio vaccine that was grown on monkey kidney cells. We find out they're mutating this stuff with a linear particle accelerator, trying to create a vaccine, but they're mutating cancer-causing monkey viruses in the process. And then you get the Cuban Missile Crisis in '62, and they shift focus to using this biological laboratory that they're doing to make a biological weapon to try to kill Fidel Castro. And since then, 60 Minutes brought me my witness, Judith Very Baker. We've come out with her book, Me and Lee, How I Came to Know, Love, and Lose Lee Harvey Oswald. She was the whiz kid asset that they needed to make the biological weapon, which is how she got involved in the middle of it, and Lee was sent to New Orleans to help her. And so, and it goes on and on and on. I'm still getting stuff. I got stuff this week on this that says the chief of police was called down to Mary Sherman's apartment when they found her body, and he picked up the phone and called a doctor who he had known since childhood to say, meet me there. I want your opinion. This doctor had been on the D-Day invasion and seen lots and lots of wounds, and they just looked at the thing and shrugged their shoulders and said, this is a setup,
Now, Dr. Mary was working on the polio vaccine, and she was experimenting, and this was around the time the CIA got involved and asked her to, and I'm really putting this in a nutshell, you give the details. From what I remember, they asked her to do testing for biological weapons and do things that she didn't want to do?
Mary was an expert in several areas. She was officially an orthopedic surgeon and stuff, but the her two big areas were cancer and radiation. She was out of the University of Chicago. She knew Enrico Fermi and all those guys, Harold Urey, all those guys up there that developed nuclear medicine and nuclear energy. And she came down to New Orleans, and she was originally part of this team that was trying to develop a anti-cancer vaccine to stop the virus that had contaminated the polio vaccine. I mean, this was one of the big secrets they didn't want to tell the public, that they mass inoculated the entire American population with a cancer-causing virus, which I think is why we have a cancer epidemic today. It's not the only factor, but I think it's the elephant in the living room.
What people have been trying, the kind of missing link, so to speak, on why all of a sudden in history has there been this explosion in cancer and certain kinds of cancer. Yeah, it's just unbelievable, and the suppression continues. Is it because of embarrassment? They're afraid. What are the implications today, 51 years later?
I have a memo from J. Edgar Hoover telling his agents not to investigate the Mary Sherman murder. And his rationale is jurisdiction. He says it's a local murder. Well, actually, Mary was electrocuted on federal property, so it really is FBI jurisdiction. And when they brought her back to her apartment to fake the murder scene, that's why they did that, because it made it look like a local murder. But on page 2 of that memo, it says that Mary Sherman and who she is, her right arm and rib cage are burned away. Somebody's name was found in her address book. Well, this somebody's name is redacted, right? But it's 6 letters long, and they don't even bother using a first name. And I think it's Oswald, because I got 2 witnesses who saw Mary Sherman with Oswald, all right? And one of them says Mary Sherman telephoned Oswald. Well, if she telephoned Oswald, of course, Oswald's name would be in her address book. So I write the FBI and this Department of Justice, and I say, look, guys, I know you're busy, but I want one word out of a 50-year-old memo, and they won't give me that one word, okay? So they're obviously hiding something, all right? And then you go to the CIA documents, the family jewels, and jewel number 1, is 100% redacted. This is a document from right at the time period of Dr. Mary's monkey. And they've got 3 solid pages of redaction, 100%. I mean, there's not an if, an and, or a but that they want to tell us of what's in that first thing, and that's over 50 years old. So there's obviously some really serious accountability issues here. If they want to tell me what's in there, then we can find out, but they're still hiding stuff, and there's no question about it.
I mean, they're probably doing things like that today with experimentation. I mean, I have a friend lives in eastern Long Island, and there's a lot of mystery around, I guess it's called Plum Island, where they do all kinds of experiments, and a lot of people believe that it was those experiments with for biological weapons involving ticks that really caused an explosion of Lyme's disease in eastern Long Island. But do you think this stuff is still going on?
Well, probably. But, the real problem with this thing in New Orleans is it was part of what you call Operation Mongoose, which was a joint CIA mafia effort to kill Castro. And as long as you have the CIA hiding behind the mafia so you can't see who's really putting up the money and pulling the strings, you got a really, really dangerous situation. And in fact, that's one of the things I've started to talk publicly about now. Chauncey Holt was one of the people in Mongoose. He had one foot in the mafia. He worked for Meyer Lansky. He had another foot in the CIA. And he's the guy that made Oswald's phony ID cards. He's the guy that made the phony ID cards for the Secret Service agents in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd. He's at the center of this whole thing, and he knew he was going to die, and about 10 days before he died, he set up a video interview so he could record everything that he had done in his life to show the American people what happens when you have these secret things going on that the American people don't even know about.
And who are you talking about there? Specifically, the last name you brought up. I want to make sure I attribute what you said to the right person.
His name is Chauncey. That's Chauncey, Holt,
Okay.
Holt, and he's got a book called Self-Portrait of a Scoundrel. 700-page book. He details everything. He's got a video out there. And I think what he has to say is so important. Chauncey's been dead for 18 years now, so he can't get on the radio and talk about himself. But I've made a point of I'm picking up his story to be able to talk about it because, I mean, he names the people who are behind setting up Oswald.
And Oswald. So in other words, Oswald, was he part of the mob, working with the CIA directly? What are the implications here?
Well, he was both. Oswald was born into the mafia in New Orleans. He worked in the mafia restaurants as a teenager. His uncle was Carlos Marcello's best friend, and he also started. He was in the Marines in the Office of Naval Intelligence, and he gets sent on a mole assignment into the Soviet Union for the CIA, and then he gets marooned over there because the Bay of Pigs. Kennedy fires the very people who know he's really working for him, and they bring him back into the United States, and after supposedly defecting and all that, and he's being paid money by the FBI the entire time he's in New Orleans, and as an informant. And he's also working as part of this Operation Mongoose, which is an off-the-books CIA project. They don't even want it in the central files, but they're providing the money through all these things they've figured out how to do to finance their secret wars and secret projects without going through Congress, And so Oswald was part of that. Oswald was sent to New Orleans to help with this bioweapons project, to take care of Judith Very Baker. They start their jobs at the Riley Coffee Company on the same day. They work for the same guy for the first week. I mean, they live on the same bus route. They ride the bus together to Riley Coffee Company every morning. I mean, it's once you start to hear the whole story here, particularly in that Me and Lee book, it really fits together. And as I said on page 1 of my book, you've been lied to with conviction, and those lies are going to continue.
And this is, I think, the 5th time it's been out. It's just out in paperback. I mean, you have updated information as we approach as we are now, it's the anniversary of Dr. Mary's death. And you have new information. Now, give us a little bit of a idea of what this new information is, and where did you get it?
Well, a lot of it was brought to me. The top line is we have the crime scene photos, so you can actually see the damage to Mary Sherman's body. Okay. We also have memos from the FBI, which is the one I just referred to. We have memos from the CIA, new information from the CDC about where this polio epidemic came from in the first place. But my favorite is a new document from the New Orleans Police Department. And, I was on the radio one day and somebody called up and said, hey, did you ever hear about that woman who lived in the patio apartments next to Mary Sherman who knew Lee Oswald and saw him there? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I'm, his brother-in-law, ex-husband's brother-in-law or something. Would you like to talk to them? And they put me in contact with him. And this guy's talking to me, and he starts talking about the burglary of Mary Sherman's apartment, not the night that she was murdered, but something about 6 months before. And I could never find the thing. And he starts talking about the police report. I said, wait, how do you know that? He said, I got the police report right here. Would you like to see it? And he sends it to me. All right? And I look at this police report, and because I was the first-round editor on Judith Very Baker's book, day to day about her relationship with Lee Oswald and what they were doing. And what they're doing is they got to test this biological weapon, right? It's killing all the mice, it's killing all the monkeys, and now they got to test it on a human to see if it'll actually kill a human. So where do you get a human you can kill, murder, and nobody's going to miss? Well, death row's a good place.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I could see that's their logical thinking.
So they go up to Angola Penitentiary in southeast Louisiana, and there's a hospital up there for the criminally insane called East Louisiana State Hospital. And they have this prisoner brought over from death row to this mental hospital, and they are going to inject him with a biological weapon. Well, they got to sneak the biological weapon onto the grounds of this thing. This is because it's a hospital for the criminally insane. It's guarded. You know, it's got a fence around and guards at the gate and all that stuff. And so what they do is Clay Shaw drives Lee Oswald and David Ferry from New Orleans 3.5 hours north up to Jackson, Louisiana, where this hospital is. But they got to wait for the van from the penitentiary. So they go down the road about 12 miles, and they decide to wait in Jackson, Louisiana. And this is on August 29th, 1963. Well, they picked the date at random. They didn't particularly give it much thought. But what they didn't know in advance, they didn't realize, was that the day before August 29th was August 28th, and that's the day that Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech in Washington. And because of that, the Congress on Racial Equality has planned black voter registration drives all across the South. And one of these black voter registration drives happens to be in Clinton, Louisiana, in front of the courthouse where they're supposed to wait for the phone call. Okay? So the marshal's there, and, in comes his black Cadillac, and, he says, who are these people? He goes over there, and the guy identifies himself as Clay Shaw. And Oswald gets out and goes and gets a line with the blacks and tries to register to vote, and he signs in Lee Harvey Oswald. So we got him. We now know these two people were working together on this thing.
The hard evidence. Wow, you got that. You actually got the police report. Go ahead, finish your sentence.
Yeah, and then what happens is 2 days later, they need to know if the biological weapon has kicked in. And there's a blood test you can do to see if the patient's got cancer, and only a few people in the country know how to do it, but Judy is one, all right? So Lee drives Judy back up to Jackson, Louisiana on August 31st, okay? Well, when I get this police report about the burglary of Mary Sherman's apartment, it's August 31st. At 11 o'clock at night, which just happens to be when Lee gets back in town and drops Judy off.
Oh, too much.
Okay, so and what do they do? I'm looking at the police report, and they $35 of cash and negotiables, $300 worth of furs, $12,500 worth of miscellaneous.
Miscellaneous. Wow. Hey, if you're just tuning in, it's Edward T. Haslam.
Haslam.
Haslam, I'm sorry. I think I did this the first time you were on the show. Haslam, Haslam, Haslam. And the book, Dr. Mary's Monkey. Now here's the subtitle again. How the Unsolved Murder of a Doctor, a Secret Laboratory in New Orleans, and Cancer-Causing Monkey Viruses are linked to Lee Harvey Oswald, the JFK assassination, and emerging global epidemics. It's now in paperback. And if you would, spend time on the polio vaccines. Were the polio vaccines millions of people took defective in any way? Links to AIDS.
Well, first of all, the polio vaccines that were given in the 50s and early 60s were grown on monkey kidney cells. All right? The polio virus likes monkey kidney cells, right? But when they took the polio virus out to make the vaccines, they got all the other viruses that were in the monkey kidney cells, right? And after they had already released 100 million doses of these things, they found a cancer-causing virus, originally named polyoma and later named SV40. And then by 1959, they realized it was in the polio vaccine. And they had already released 100 million doses. And they had another 100 million on the shelf. And they really didn't want to stand up and say, sorry, people, we just mass inoculated all your children with a cancer-causing virus. So they stamped it secret, and they wanted to get really busy trying to find a vaccine that could stop this SV40, which is a DNA kind of virus. And they were in a hurry, so they started using radiation, because you can mutate things with radiation. And the problem is, SV40 is not connected to AIDS. But in that same batch of polio vaccine was another monkey virus, this one from Africa, because these monkeys are all caged together and stuff, and they got cross-infected. This other one was called SIV, which is the simian immunodeficiency virus. That is the direct ancestor to AIDS. And so, my concern is these people were shooting gamma ray radiation through test tubes with SIV in them, and they could have very easily mutated SIV into HIV. And if you talk to people that are knowledgeable of the genome of HIV and stuff, they'll tell you there's a weird spot on that something really unusual happened, and I think it was radiation. So, can you prove it to the satisfaction of a jury? I don't think so, and I don't think anybody's going to let you. And I think this is just one that we all just have to think about and realize that this is a scientifically plausible explanation for the creation of AIDS right at the time that it happened.
Yeah. And during the 60s, they used the sugar cubes. I think I remember getting that. Is that the kind of was that the period of giving sugar cubes out for polio vaccine? Or
SV40 was in the sugar cube version of it. Before they started doing sugar cubes, they were still using syringes. And if you got the syringe, you got it worse because you didn't have the protection of your intestines. It just went straight into your blood supply.
Unbelievable.
And I remember going to the school cafeteria with my mother and my brother and sister, and fortunately, I was so young they wouldn't give me the vaccine. My father wouldn't allow it. He said, your immune system's not strong enough to deal with it yet. But my older brother and older sister got it, and they both got cancer. One of the things that people always say was, how come somebody didn't speak up? Well, Chauncey spoke up. That's why I'm trying to call attention to what he was saying there. Did. And the title of this conference is called Oswald's Summer of Secrets. It's all about that summer in New Orleans in 1963. We got all these wonderful speakers. We got Jim Morris, Robert Groden, Judith Berry Baker, Joan Mellon. A lot of really big names in the JFK research community. And it's going to be in New Orleans, and you can get information about it. The website is called oswaldconference.com.
Right, very good. Give your website out again, too.
It's Dr. Mary's Monkey, but you spell out the word doctor, D-O-C-T-O-R, Mary's, no apostrophes, of course, because it's an internet address. Dr. Mary's Monkey, or just Google that set of words, and mine will be the first thing that pops up. And I've got about 15 hours of videos on there. I've got reader quotes. I've got a blog on there where I keep putting information as I get it, and it's all free. So just go ahead and check it out.
You do this, it's part of your life, it's a passion to get the truth out. Is there any fear that you're, going into an area they're going to retaliate somehow?
Well, they haven't retaliated in 20 years. And I made a go, no-go decision a long time ago, and I just refuse to worry about it. And to me, sunlight is safety. See, I'm not what they have to worry about. I have no power. I have no budget. I can't arrest anybody. I can't do any of those things that really worry them. All I have is a story and an investigation inquiry that I did. And if they do anything to me, that's going to call attention to why me. Yeah. It's going to call attention to the story. So I used to be concerned right before I published this thing 20 years ago because it wasn't out yet, and there wouldn't be any way for me to get it out if I was gone, But that was 20 years ago, and I've had 20 years of radio interviews, and sold tens of thousands of books, and
it's it's one of those stories. Once you hear it, you say, "Did I hear that right?" And I repeated the first show we did probably over the course of a year or so, probably 3 times at different day parts, because so many people said, that was just unbelievable. And yeah, well, good luck to you in your work. And again, the book, Dr. Mary's Monkey, and that subtitle, How the Unsolved Murder of a Doctor, a Secret Laboratory in New Orleans, and Cancer-Causing Monkey Viruses are linked to Lee Harvey Oswald, the JFK assassination, and emerging global epidemics. Scary stuff. Edward T. Haslam.
Thank you very much, Allan.
Great to talk to you again.
All right.
Keep up the good work.
Okay.
Bye-bye.